that's not corporate exactly, but like moving into corporate and now you're an entrepreneur. But over the course of your career, getting into sort of the tips that you've come up with.
Sure.
Can you kind of walk us through for those who are sort of newer in their journey? I think it's always interesting to hear people's trajectory.
Yeah, the first thing I will say, Nancy, is that whatever you think you want to be, that might not be it. So when I was growing up, I wanted to be a buyer. When I first went to Quinnipiac College, I wanted to be a buyer, so my degree is in retail management marketing. And so that didn't work out, so I went down the tech route. So I spent a great deal of years, decades in fact, in information technology. I was a developer, I was a teacher, I was a project manager, program manager, and I did that globally. So I may be dating myself if I say SAP, but it's a financial system. I was implementing financial systems, and I lived in Canada for 14 months. I worked at a company called Diageo. And I just decided at one point that I wanted to do something more meaningful, hard work. And I was behind the scenes with the tech work, but I wanted to connect with people. And so I decided to leave corporate America, and I started my own company 2 years after that. So actually Sunday was my 8-year anniversary as an entrepreneur. And I'm very proud of that. It's been a journey. So through that process, I've come up with books. I think it's because I had a daughter, Millie, she's 7 years old, and I felt like I wanted to write what I know so she would have instruction. So it's more about legacy for me. So I wrote my first book, Achievement Unlocked, Strategies to Set Goals and Manifest Them, because I think goal setting is fundamental. So that was my first book, and then I felt I have more to say. I did it. And so I wrote The Power of Owning Your Career. I did that, and then I went to Kalamazoo, Michigan, and I was at the Stryker Corporation speaking to a group of women. They rocked my world, and I got on the plane and wrote this book, 52 Tips for Owning Your Career, the first edition. And COVID happened, right? A lot changed. So I felt like life changed, I changed. I want to say more about careers, because a lot of people decided to exit the workplace. And so I wrote the second edition specifically to talk about, what about DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion? What's the impact on careers? What about Black women? There's a lot of talk about Black women and the focus on them, so I wrote a letter to Black women in the book. What about self-care and burnout and things like that? So there was a lot more meat for me to add to the book, and so that's where the second version came from. There may be a third version because life continues to ebb and flow, and so do I.
I love that. Well, that was going to be one of my questions we talked about. Sort of what changed from this book to the next one, or kind of the state of careers, or how is career advice different now than it was maybe from your first book, right? Like, what are people coming to you saying, how do I get ahead in my corporate job, or I'm thinking of considering an entrepreneurial job?
Yeah, I think a lot of people are wanting to exit to find meaningful work, hard work. So there's a lot more entrepreneurship today, I would say. A lot of clients that I deal with, it's about confidence. I talk a lot about confidence, how to build your confidence, how to amplify your voice, because people don't know how to, there are gender differences, and so how do I successfully package my voice and amplify it? How do I ask for what I want? So there's a lot more of that, I would say.
I want to go back, continue the entrepreneurial questions, but I want to go back when you were in corporate, before you made this leap. Did you have mentors? Did you get career advice? Or did this book evolve because you wrote it wishing that you had this book? Like, a lot of times that's the catalyst for people writing their book.
Okay.
How did that evolve for you?
Yeah, so I think there's a defining moment. I remember specifically, I had a performance review, and I wasn't happy with it at all. I wasn't happy with the feedback, and I was like, oh my gosh, I've been here forever. I'm not VP level or where I want to be. And so I remember having a conversation with my manager, sort of expecting, sort of demanding, probably with my presence, demanding, like, how could this be? And I remember her saying to me, Simone, your career is your responsibility. And I don't know what was going on with me, but I actually heard her. I was like, you know what? Yep, you're right. Because before that, I was expecting things to be handed to me, And when I wasn't getting it, I was very disappointed. So now that I've reframed my responsibility, I'm now a driver as opposed to a passenger. And I spent many years in my career in the passenger seat where people would say to me, you look great for this position, how about this? I was like, oh my gosh, thanks. Off I go. And so it was sort of a zigzag, not strategic at all. And then one day I was like, what am I doing? I don't even like this. How did I get here? And so when she said that to me, it was like permission to be in the driver's seat. It was like, you know what? I'm not gonna be disappointed anymore. Because guess what? I'm gonna get in the driver's seat and I'm going to make decisions that are for Simone. So I took a sabbatical. I took a 3-month unpaid sabbatical so I could think. Because what I realized was I didn't have time to think. I was just going. And so life was just going by, the years were going by, and I'm like, 15 years, whoa, okay. So I took a 3-month sabbatical, and I will say it was wonderful. I got to smell the roses. And then there came a time where corporate America called and said, come back. And then they said, there's a trip to Napa, and I must admit, I came back. I came back for wine country. I went to this amazing event, played polo. Anyway, I did come back early, and I regretted that. So I think there were signs on the wall saying exit. But I was so comfortable with my salary, with access, with the prestige of working for this company, rooms that I was in, it wooed me, and I stayed. And I knew I should have left. So I finally decided to take a natural aptitude test. And there's an organization called Johnson O'Connor Research Foundation in New York and Chicago. And I took this test, and it said something about entrepreneurship. I was like, what? I need my job and my stability. So I didn't do it. But then I had a medical event and I was out again. And I just said, you know what? Life's too short. And so I said, the next time I bet, I'm gonna bet on Simone. And I did, and I jumped. And that was 8 years ago. Well, no, 10. It took me 2 years to decide to go for it. So yeah, about 10 years ago.
Wow. I love in your book how it's a balance of doing things for yourself, like the planning and the auditing and the, but on the other side, it is partnering and building your network and everything else. And it's a wonderful balance of, to your point, what you can do for yourself, but also that you cannot do it all, all alone. Where do you, to your point, for those of us, or for anybody who's in a point of change, how do they get started? And are your 52 tips, like, are these in order, right? Like, do you start doing it internally and then it becomes an external exercise if you're really in a moment of transition?
You can jump around in the book. I have in the book a checklist for the 52 tips, so you can decide what resonates with you and start there. I will say it's helpful to do an audit first of where you are and where you feel less than happy, and to have that in mind and think about where you want to go so that could direct you in the book. But I like to talk about partnership, and I would say that Sherry does it really well, because I think building relationships is key to success. And one of the lessons I learned as a little girl that I believed for so many years was, heads down, do your job, those results will get you where you want to go. And the truth of the matter is that's not the case. So when people would invite me to water cooler conversations, I thought it was a waste of time. When I was invited to the bar or some event after work, I'd be like, I worked all day, I'm not gonna go to that. But I learned that presence actually has some impact. Even as an entrepreneur, I need to show up in rooms instead of solo. And I need to attract partners to help me succeed and not just do it on my own. So lots of lessons there, Nancy.
I love the driver's seat and the owning. It's such a active versus passive feeling. For people who might still be in need, but I don't have control of my situation, what are some questions they can ask themselves, or what can we draw upon from your tips to help make that shift from passive to active?
Someone said to me before that at certain points in your career, you are in fact a passenger, whether you like it or not. And I think that's true. I think the recognition and awareness of what do I want my imprint to be on my career? What do I want at the end state? Is important to be thinking futuristically about what you want. So when someone brings opportunities to you, you can vet it with your values and your wants, your future needs before you make a decision. So I would say get comfortable in amplifying your voice. Practice asking for what you want, even if it's at a restaurant. You know, I'd like this. See what it feels like. Videotape yourself asking for what you want, and then practice asking people at work for things, because I think a lot of things comes down to asking for what you want instead of keeping it inside. So I would say really focus on asking for what you want, really be aware of what you do want and articulate it. Tell people what you want, even if it's not asking for something. Start to tell people what you want, and people will start to help you.
That's a wonderful sort of segue. My word for the year is ask, as a matter of fact. So I think I needed to hear that as well.
Nice.
Nice. We were talking earlier, and you mentioned goals, and people having goals. And I think, again, there's this like older world or pre-COVID thinking of goals. Okay, I need a title, or I need a certain income level or revenue level, or like those goals. And I think whether it's post-COVID, whether it's being a certain age, that shift starts to change, and we start saying, to your point, what do you really want? And sometimes it goes beyond a number or a status level, right? Like meaningful work we were talking about earlier. What are some things people can ask themselves, or what are they thinking about in terms of impact, or it could be a matter of how many people they are in touch with. What are some other ways to think about what you want your career to look like that's not just a dollar sign?
It could be experiences. What experiences do I want to have? Where do I want to go? Maybe you want to do a global assignment. Maybe you want to work as a nomad and be someplace else. So it's not just about the dollars, and what do you want your quality of life to be? How do you want to engage with your family and friends? For me personally, I'm thinking about, okay, no more night work and no more weekend work, and really trying to hold that boundary. Okay, Laura knows this, no meetings on Fridays. I need to think. I'm so busy running. So really being intentional about recreating the way things work for me and not burning myself out. It's really, transparently, I was really burned out at the end of last year because I worked really hard. And I just decided life is short. I want to, as a coach told me before, Simone, enjoy the pregnancy. Don't just be about having a baby. I was like, wow, that makes sense. And it does. I think a lot of times you're so busy waiting to get to the end state and enjoying the end result that you don't enjoy the journey. And I feel like that with entrepreneurship. I'm so busy wanting to hit this revenue goal, so busy trying to land this client, that I need to stop and enjoy the small wins, the small moments where I'm like, wow, you're a badass, like, whoa, like things like that. And so I want to be more intentional and realize that I don't need anybody's permission. I think that I continue to have the corporate mindset where I'm waiting for someone to give me permission to take a day off. And that was like, aha, that blew my mind. Like, oh, you can actually take the day off. Oh, I can? Waiting for someone.
Ask that boss.
Yeah, right. Like the imaginary boss. I was waiting to ask these things, and I think giving myself permission to enjoy my business, to enjoy the journey, is something new for 2023 for me.
And I think that's corporate. I also just think it's the productivity, kind of capitalist-like mindset that we all were. Well, I would say people of a certain age. I think my hope is, as we are, a next generation is coming through, they're looking at things differently and valuing things and expectations of work.
I think they most certainly are. They're asking more of companies, right? It's about what you stand for as a company, social justice, and it's not just about the salary and the job. There's a lot more asked for companies today.
Yeah.
My brand is about inclusive leadership, and actually it's women's empowerment. I'm really big on empowering women to take the driver's seat. So I do a lot of career coaching around that, but inclusion is big. I help organizations create an inclusive workplace. So I keep hammering that message away so that eventually people, when they hear Simone Morris, they won't think of my old company name, but they'll think of what my brand is about. So I would say think about your leadership brand and what you want it to be.
That's a nice segue into one of the additions you put into this book, and that was your letter to Black women. How did that, I mean, during COVID, and it was a very powerful, time for everyone, but in your letter to Black women, what was the message that you felt you needed to say, and how is that evolving in your work that you're doing with inclusivity and DEI?
I'm doing a lot of leadership facilitation and coaching for women of color. I think that evolved. Honestly, I sort of feel like when Judge Ketanji, was being considered for her role, it was speaking to me on so many levels and bringing up so many memories of things in the workplace, of disappointments and working really hard and still getting overlooked. I was reading something yesterday about Beyonce, how people are like, oh, she's got all these Grammys, and then someone just honed in like, yeah, she did, but she didn't get the album of the year, or she didn't get perhaps what she wants, but it may seem glittery, right? What?
No, I was like 32 Grammys, I mean, pretty extraordinary.
It is extraordinary, but sometimes with that, or the perception, there's other things that people are desiring. I'm reading about. So anyway, I'm reading a lot about the Black woman's experience, and I am a Black woman, and I've filtered my voice a number of times. So I just felt called to say something, to salute the Black women and to say, I see you, I feel your pain and struggle, and that it is different to get ahead in your career in the workplace. And here's what I think can help you on this journey. And I definitely speak a lot about amplifying your voice. Like, do not, because there are stereotypes around angry Black women, or, we're not approachable, et cetera, et cetera. And so I wanted to create safe space, to your point, psychological safety, and say, I see you, I hear you, I know what it's like, and let me amplify the journey and talk about it.
Are you taking that message, in addition to people who are already in the working world, to younger audiences, you know what I mean, to not wait for them to get into corporate America or get into a job and feel not seen? How are you sort of starting earlier with that?
Well, recently,
and you have a daughter, so
I
that's
do.
Exactly, that's the way you start.
I think I'm going to her school on a Friday to talk about Black History Month. So I'm all like, Wakanda forever. I do that all the time. Nothing Wakanda. Anyway, yes. So I'm having conversations with her. She is challenging me. I must say, she's 7, and her voice is amplified with us anyway. I want to work on it for the outside world. So lots of conversations there. I'm very involved with school and making sure my voice is heard and that there is representation. I'm challenging scenarios where I don't see representation and leadership, and asking questions and showing up and making suggestions. I'm also on the LiveGirl advisory.
I was going to mention it if you didn't.
Yes, I love it. So I've done Instagram Live, I've done the career readiness, I've had a mentee, we had an intern. So it's not just talk, I am passionate. I just went back to my high school and talked to them about careers. I don't know how much they were listening, but I was, I mean, how much was I listening back then? But anyway, I went back and I talked, and we will plan on doing some more of that, just getting involved in the community. But the message starts young, and I foresee me becoming a Girl Scout leader. My daughter's a Girl Scout, and I have been like, but I feel like that's going to be a part of my journey.
Oh, then you got that, you're already
My brand colors is green and purple, so.
You got it. We're gonna have Q&A in just a second, but the people in the book chat know that, like, I always like to ask the question of just literally your physical book journey, right? Like, because writing a book is hard. It is, like, some people are like, I always wanted to write a book. You've done it, you've done several. Can you walk us through your process? Because this is on top of being an entrepreneur, right? Like, where do you make the time? How do you start with a format? I know you've self-published, so how do you get it edited? Because I love for people to know what goes behind coming in a book. It doesn't just magically happen.
That's right.
And there's a team that goes in there. So, you know, how do you make the time to make it happen? How do you do your writing? Do you go off in a cabin and, you know?
Yeah, I think the first time you do it is the hardest time, because, you know, it's like having a child. The first time you don't know anything and you're researching and trying to find out how to do it, but once you've done it, you're like, okay, this is how we do it. So for me, having a book is like having a baby. So I did my first book. I think being clear on your why is really important. For me, my why is my daughter, and I wanted to leave instructions for her based on my journey. So it really got me to the finish line, because I had started a book many years ago, but I never finished it. But once I had Millie, I felt, oh, I need to finish this. Because what if I'm not here? I want her to know what I know. And so that became my impetus. This book, the first one, was, the impetus was a group in Kalamazoo, Michigan, where they just asked me they just like squeezed every information out of me about careers that I went on. I was like, wow, I didn't say enough in the second book. Let me write this third book. So I see, for me, the process really starts with the why, and then a table of contents. What do I want to say? And by the way, I still get scared. I'm 4 books in, and I've collaborated on a number of other books, but I'm being asked to write a book for 360 pages, and I must say it terrifies me, because I'm wondering how I'm going to find the time to do this. So it has kept me up at night. But I did it if I combine the 4 books. The 360 pages is there. But hearing that, I just thought, I don't know how I'm gonna make that happen with my schedule. So I think it's back to the clear on your why, feel the fear, and do it anyway. So dancing with discomfort and moving through it till I get to the other side. Having accountability partners. So I have partners who I tell my goals, and then I actually do go to an Excel spreadsheet and say, chapter 1, I'm gonna work on this for a week, and then I know my end date, editing, round 1, 2, 3, and 2 weeks here, 2 weeks here, 2 weeks here. But a lot of times I miss my dates because of life, and I go into my spreadsheet, I update, and then I commit. So like I say to Laura, I'm like, Laura, okay, the book is going live November 14th. Like I told Laura, I can't, So now I've publicly said it, I gotta stick to it, and that keeps me going. So it's a lot of negotiation, but the arc there, or the pyramid there, is the why.
I love it. And can you talk a little bit about the team that helps you get your book out, right? So you have an accountability partner. Do you have an editor or a thought partner? Like, do you get stuck? What does that look like?
I have an editor. I have a photographer. Everybody say hi to O. So book cover. I have a graphic designer. So I like things like Fiverr and Upwork. So I use Fiverr. I use Upwork to find a graphic designer, and then we work on covers. I actually go into Canva this time. I went into Canva and I designed the cover, and I said, this is what I want. And then I gave it to the graphic designer to make it look professional, because I thought this looks too amateurish. Right. So I create the vision, and then I hand off to Kim, and she's done all 4 of my books, so she does the visual. This time, I did a typesetter, and that was a new experience for me. A typesetter is important because they make your book look sexy. You know, a table no longer looks like a table, it's attractive. And then they changed the heading, and I was like, ooh la la. You know, so a typesetter is something people don't think about, but I have a friend who's a publisher, actually my best friend Bridget. She's a publisher, and she uses a typesetter, so I hired a typesetter to do the layout of the book, and it looks so much better than my version of the book. So editor, several rounds, graphic designer, who else did I mention?
Design
typesetter.
Yeah,
there's a lot of people involved.
I just like for people to know, like, yes, you can publish a book all by yourself, but it really is not a matter of taking a PDF and
uploading it to Amazon. Yeah, you can, but it's sloppy. You got to think about your brand.
Yeah.
It's a lot more than that. And what do you want people to feel when they see it? I want people to be like, ooh, look at that cover. Like, oh, I can't wait to read this. Or, so there's a bit of that. So you can do it, but it can be sloppy. And by the way, you don't have to get it perfect the first time. Laura, can you do me a favor and get me the first copy? Do we have the 52 tips, the first one? I want to show the first version and this version.
It's just one of those things where it's like, oh, anybody can publish. I'm like, yes, but it really really helps if you think it through
Yeah.
and put some thought into it and take it there. So thank you for indulging us with that journey for the aspiring writers in here. Not looking at anybody in particular, but.
So, thank you so much, Laura.
Sure.
Laura helps me so much. So this is the first version of the book, and that's the second version of the book. So I think this version, like I said, I wrote it on the plane, and when I was writing this one, I just had so much more to say. And the other thing is, I have learned to separate myself, the corporate side, the professional side, and the personal side. This book is more about the personal side, being vulnerable. Because I think 2020, post-2020 taught us that vulnerability is key. And so I was trying to, okay, let me scrub this out, not say so much about this. And now there are more stories and there was more vulnerability. Thank you, Brene Brown. More vulnerability in there about Simone and her journey.
And in your lens that you share it with. I'm happy to, are you good for questions?
Yes, I
really
am.
have
I'm excited
questions.
to hear
I can ask
questions.
my questions, but, you didn't read the book, it's okay. Questions about, career or advice, please, we're a small enough group.
First of all, congratulations.
Thank
It's
you.
very inspiring.
Thank you.
I am actually very curious on, you mentioned you took 2 years. And I'm very curious because I think everything works once you know exactly what you want. And how did you go through that journey to truly identify what you want? And I think it's successful once you find that path and stick to it. There's deviations you can take, but you can't take full swings. So how do you go through that process?
Yeah, I like to use the word discovery and explore. I think when you know what you don't want, you know what you do want. And so I remember when I first started, I was a project manager when I was in corporate, program manager, IT. So when I left, I was teaching project management. I was like, oh my gosh. But I needed to make money, so I was teaching project management. I was doing project management where I was like, I don't love this. Why am I doing this? So I think when you are clear on what you want to do, and also I had a coach. So a career coach can help you hold your hand through difficult decisions and making bolder leaps, build your confidence, etc. So I had a coach that helped me to decide to do a sabbatical. And then the other thing is, it took me a long time to listen to my voice. I was listening to other people's interpretation of what I should be doing. Oh, you need to make sure you niche down. You just one thing, you're confusing people with your website. Wait, and I was like, I was doing things, but then it came a point where I was like, I'm still unhappy. I thought if I left corporate, I would be happy. So when I started listening to Simone, my voice matters. This is my life. This is my journey. This is my company. And started, you know what? We've got 2 lanes. I'm not one-dimensional. I'm multi-dimension and I embrace my diversity. How can we talk about diversity and say niche down? Let my diversity flow and I let myself experience and discover. I did teach project management for a while and then I decided I don't love this. This is coming off. We're not offering this anymore. So I think through a discovery you will uncover, if you allow yourself to have experiences to uncover.
And I would ask, to build on that, you mentioned one of the self-evaluation or diagnostic tool you took. I know, now there's StrengthsFinder and the Calico and, old-fashioned Myers-Briggs and, the dynamic wealth model, as you can tell, I've taken a few of these. But are there, I find that sometimes that's a reminder of things you might already know about yourself. Are there ones in particular that when you work with people, you advise them to work on or any sort of an assessment to continue that discovery process?
I do a lot around inclusive leadership. So I have an inclusive leadership assessment. You can download it on our website. But I would say, there are things like DISC to know your communication style. There's Kobe. But for me, the reason the aptitude test I mentioned is important is because it's natural aptitude. What are you really good at? So again, it was the Johnson O'Connor Research Foundation, and it was this weird test to test my aptitude, and things came up on there. I was like, really? Like, I didn't know that I could do that. So when I saw entrepreneurship, I was like, yeah, I don't think I can do that. But the truth of the matter is I actually can. It took me 2 years to believe it and to go after entrepreneurship, even though I heard it from the assessment.
Got it. More questions?
First off, I love listening to you, and it just really resonates, so thank you for being here tonight. I had a question. You were talking about the other book that you're gonna write,
Yeah.
and I just wanted to understand that, because you said like someone's telling you that it has to be 365
Yeah, it's a book
pages.
publisher, so as opposed to me deciding what I want to write, I've been approached by a book publisher to write a book. And so there's a requirement for page count, so when I hear that and I think about my schedule, I start just, getting very anxious about how do I make this happen in a 4 to 6 month time frame? What does my life look like for that? So I'm learning how to package my notes. I actually said no earlier this week because I did a pros and cons, and as much as it's prestigious and global, and I had to think about my life and how I created it, and now I'm not holding the boundary, I'm going back on that. So I said no, and now of course, once you finally get up your courage to say no, there are people who are going to challenge your no. So I received an email, I've been requested to be on a phone call. So, I'm just going to listen and then give myself the time to decide based on what I hear. But my initial response is a no to that.
Because when you were talking about the other piece and listening to Simone, I
Yes.
was like, okay, how is that gonna be? When
Yes.
they're telling you how much you have to write.
Yes,
So-
I did say no, because I'm doing a bit more of the no's and packaging it in a way that people can accept the no. Because that people don't like to hear no, as evidenced by this woman emailing and call, I need to talk to you about this decision. Packaging the no is important in corporate, not in corporate, in everything. You have to figure out how to say it and how to give yourself time to digest, process, and come back with what works for you with your response. And that I think that takes time to get there.
And then what was the book supposed to be about?
I will say it's about inclusive leadership. I do not have a DEI book. I participated in a collective breath after 2020 and George Floyd. There's a book about the Black experience, so I contributed to that book, but I don't have, most of my books are about careers and goal setting, because I really love that stuff, and it's easier for me, but the inclusive leadership requires me to really think about it and the audience, so I have not done one of those yet, so it would be around inclusive leadership.
Okay, we're ready for you when you do it.
Oh.
You're coming back from book group.
Yeah, oh,
Right, if you
please.
need a motivating factor to say yes, you come back
Thank
from
you,
book group.
thank you.
Great question, Felicia. Lisa?
Well, you were speaking about Brene Brown, who I find very inspiring, especially being a white woman, and she's incredibly inclusive. And what would you recommend for books for non-Black women to read to help us understand your position out there? And how, I read Tamara Burke's book, I've read a few other things that Brene Brown recommended. I'm always looking to learn more about how it feels on the other side, so to speak, and make myself more, inclusive, knowledgeable of DEI. And do you have any books that you recommend for
I love that.
someone like myself to read, and perhaps others?
I thank you for asking, I thank you for being brave and bringing that into the conversation. What a wonderful question. The first thing I would do is talk to Laura, because we do have a book club where we focus on books around inclusion. So we are about to read Michelle Obama to give us some light for the journey ahead. That's gonna be our first book. But we've read books like The Sum of Us, which is a book about racism and how we come together. So there's The Sum of Us by Heather McGhee, that's one book. I would recommend the Memo by Minda Harts. It's about, the experience, like you're talking about, what is it like on the other side? And so Minda Harts talks about that in the book, The Memo. There's also a book, the book about the police that we really enjoyed, They're Not Like Us by Joe Piazza. I'm forgetting the other author, but Christine Pride and Joe Piazza. There's a book called They're Not Like Us, and we read it and we were like, because what it is, it's about the police. I don't want to give the story away, but it's a situation that happens, and it's about perspective, and it's enjoyable reading. So we got through it so quick, So I would say that book is a really good book to read. There's another book about race. Do we have a download on the website about books though? Don't we have
We
a?
do.
You
We
can
have
go
a-
on the-
Yeah, on the website, there's a free download for 30 books
Yeah.
Great.
around DEI.
Yeah.
Great.
So go to Simone Morris
And there's one for
Enterprises.
career books too. so
Yeah,
they're both
Both
there.
sides. And I will say, this past weekend, I watched a couple things. One, I watched Amend on Netflix. And I'm still digesting and processing, so I think if you want to think and think and think before you act, I think there's a lot of, let's get to the action. But there's a lot of trauma that's going around and a lot of pain that needs empathy or people to acknowledge. So if you watch Amend and then there's a 1619 project,
Yeah.
it just gives you pause to be like, oh my gosh, okay, some of this stuff is coming back around. Wow, no wonder people are, it's just a very different time. So I have a ton of things to say about that, but that should get you in a direction.
Great, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
I have a question. So if you were to go back when you joined corporate America, what advice would you give your younger self?
Oh gosh, this could be a book. Man, this may be the next one. My advice for the younger Simone. Okay. The advice for the younger Simone is to be more confident. To believe that my voice belongs in the room. Because I'm an introvert, that's my preference. So a lot of times I sit and listen, digest, process before I have a thought to share. But I think there are some people who want to hear your voice. So to convince myself to say just one thing in meetings, just so that I take up space, I'm there for a reason. So don't just blend in. And I would get up from my desk more. And I would say yes to opportunities. I got opportunities to do things, and I would say no because I was afraid, like moving away from home. Oh my gosh, what would I do there? My family is here. And I came up with every excuse and I didn't do it. So I would read the book, The Year of Yes by Shonda Rhimes, so that would give me courage around embracing experiences. I would get more sponsors and mentors. I am very clear on mentoring, but I believe it's the people in the rooms making the decisions that you need to be clear who's speaking up for you. I'm a huge Carla Harris fan, so anything she does, I love. So make sure you have sponsors. Not just important to have mentors. And I found my sponsor on the way out of corporate, and I said to him, if I met you at the beginning, I wonder where I would be, what I would be doing. But I was checked out, and he gave me a way out. So I would say sponsors, and there was one more thing I wanted to tell you. I will think of it and come back to it, but that's a start.
Can I distract you for those
Yes.
who aren't clear? Would you sort of elaborate on the difference between sponsors and mentors? I just think that's a really important distinction.
Yeah. A mentor can give you advice on, a specific area. So maybe I have a mentor around finance, around marketing, around specific areas that I want to work on in myself. But the sponsor is the extra mile. The sponsor is going to remove roadblocks for you. Not a mentor can be a sponsor. But what we want is decision makers who are having conversations, who have access. Think about the New York City Marathon and how many sponsors that allow them to put the marathon on. There are so many activities that have sponsors because they're putting their money where their mouth is. It's that extra mile. So I have the mentors, but then I would go for positions. I didn't get them. But if I had sponsors who had power or financial cachet that they could use or have a conversation on my behalf, that would be great. Like I went from raising $5,000 to $80,000. Like in my mind, I was like, oh, our budget is only $5,000. That's all we have. And then I talked to the sponsors, like, what do you need? It's like, what? And then I work up this budget and take 100 people to Washington, D.C. to the MLK monument. And it just blew my mind about what I could actually do with the partnership of a sponsor. So I encourage people, go for the sponsorship.
So it's
Like
like a
mentors
sponsor
too.
kind of paves the way versus a mentor is there for advice. That's free, or the sponsor helps open doors, pave the way,
And-
potentially contribute financially.
Yes, and I kind of say a sponsor is a mentor plus.
Mhm.
I don't want to make it seem like your mentor can't help you to do things and
Yeah.
achieve things. Yes, they can.
And do you, find mentors and sponsors? Do they find you? How, what
Both.
does that matchmaking look like?
Both, I think you said it, sponsors find you. Think about, have you seen somebody, you're like, there's something about that person, I wanna help them. They didn't even say it, they're just their presence and what they say, and you're like, you know what, I wanna help this person get ahead. So then you start to invest in them. Call me, here's my card, call me, let's have lunch. You start sharing, and then the relationship grows. So there can be the attraction of sponsorship, but there can also be the strategic, intentional, I want this person as my sponsor. Let me start to build a relationship, nurture the relationship, and when the relationship gets to the right point, let me ask for your help and support in my career.
Thank you for your question.
Simone, did you ever experience imposter syndrome?
Yes.
Can you talk a little bit about that?
I still do.
Okay.
I think there's this story in our minds that when we are destined for greatness, it's a challenge, like, who do you think you are?
Right.
Like, you should be grateful for what you have. And so it's a dance of, yeah, I know who I am, I hear you, but I'm gonna keep going till I prove to myself. One of the things that my therapist told me, I have a therapist to keep my head straight. One of the things my therapist said is to have a success wall. So that when I forget and that imposter syndrome comes up, I have these moments. Ask Laura, she comes over to my office and I have these moments that make me proud. And I did it on something called Mixed Tiles. If anybody's ever heard of Mixed Tiles, I ordered all these photos, about 25 of them, and then I made something at the top, inspirational statement at the top, and I stuck them to the wall. And one of the photos from tonight is gonna be on the wall. So it reminds me of, what a rock star I am when the noise is there, and then I go running to calm it. I listen to Joel Osteen to calm it. I journal, I do what I can to calm the noise. But I think Michelle Obama was talking about that. I don't know if anybody saw her interview with Robin Roberts, and we're like, Michelle Obama, oh, okay, all right, so I think it happens to all of us at one point or another.
Great question, thank you. Anybody else? Well, I'm gonna thank you for your time, thank you for sharing your expertise.